This is the Ayahuasca Files. No AI was used in the production of this podcast.
And we're live with the Ayahuasca Files. My name is Matthew MacDonald, and I wanted to interview the founder of this organization, Allan Finney. I found you a few years ago, and I haven't had much interaction with your organization. I just remember it was a bit of a news highlight that came up. I'm always a little bit interested when I see anything legally happen with psychedelics, whether that be medicinal or religious or otherwise. And you're not the only one that I had heard of in Canada, but you were the first one that I had seen that had engaged in, on a legal basis, access to psychedelics of some kind that had come from outside of a Christian framework.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And that's why I was on your email list, because I must have subscribed to a newsletter or something years ago.
Yeah.
And now I'm here because you sent out a mass email for volunteers. So that's a bit of my introduction as to how I got here. And I wanted to start with you because I wanted anything else to refer back to what this is, and you were the driving force behind that. So,
Sure.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and how this whole thing got off the ground?
Sure. Yeah, I started taking ayahuasca 10 years ago, almost this month, and had no idea really what I was getting into, and kept it deliberately that way. I didn't want to color my perceptions about what was happening in ayahuasca ceremonies, so I didn't do a lot of research. So I started taking ayahuasca and found out quickly that I was in way over my head. But anyway, I carried on doing ceremonies. Eventually, and the reason I was doing ayahuasca ceremonies was for my own personal mental, emotional healing, which ayahuasca is great for that. But there's a lot more to it than that. But that's why I was taking ayahuasca. That was the focus of my ceremony. A lot of what people call shadow work, or understanding how I was constructed as a human being. So, and then getting rid of that negative energy from my alcoholic upbringing and dysfunctional life. And it worked very well. It was working. I was progressing. It was the only thing in my life where I found that where I was getting the relief that I'd been looking for 30 some years after I sobered up from alcohol. 30 years of looking in self-help, Buddhism, thisism, thatism, Brad John the family, all of the self-help, trying to figure out what's going on in my head, counseling, therapists, all kinds of things. And it wasn't until I came to ayahuasca that I found the profound relief or the life-altering changes that I was looking for. And then so once I found it, I was all in. It was like, okay, I found this, let's go at it. So that started about what I call my initial, I was 59 years old at the time, and that started what I call my 5-year deep dive exploration into the medicine, where I was driven to do the next ceremony. And like, I'm working on a process. I got to get to the next ceremony. And I had the opportunity to do it. I was working with Shipibo shamans in Peru and a Shipibo trained Canadian shaman in Canada. So I was helping out in the ceremonies. I was importing ayahuasca. Every ceremony, I was right there. So I was going at it. Along the way, it was like, and experiencing that healing power for myself, I said, what the heck? This is illegal? That's insane. So I started exploring the legalities of it. I have a journalism background, so, and I've also worked inside government, provincial government bureaucracy, so I kind of had an idea how these processes work. So I found out that you could apply for what's called a Section 56 Health Canada exemption to take ayahuasca. Now, up until we got our exemption, the only ayahuasca churches in Canada were the, like you say, the Christian, well, they're Christian-based. I don't know a lot about them, but they're Brazilian ayahuasca churches that had been given Section 56 exemptions in Canada. Well, that wasn't my tradition. I was coming from a Shipibo shamanic tradition. So put together the organizing committee, consulted with our shamans in Peru. It was a year getting all of that organized and putting together an application for the companionship of the sacred vine, which is what we eventually called it, and put in an application with Health Canada's Section 56 program. That started a whole set of circumstances that was, how would I put it? It was frustrating, I guess, if nothing else.
Yes, and I think the bureaucracy of it alone is I really want to get into that. I do want to back up a bit though, which was
sure. Yeah.
Tell us a bit. What is a Section 56 exemption, and what is it Section 56 of? To begin with, what is that?
Yeah. There's the Canadian Drugs and Substances Act, CDSA. Section 56 says scientific, medical, research applications can get an exemption to study restricted substances. So, for example, if you wanted to study, I don't know, heroin, cocaine, some other restricted substance, and you were a medical researcher, you would apply to the federal government under the Section 56 program. So the same program that the religious exemption is under is the same Section 56 that everybody's under. But there's some very big differences as to administratively how they're run.
Okay, so Section 56 is sort of in Canada. It's sort of like a catch-all drug law exemption for ranging from scientific research reasons to, in your case, religious reasons.
That's it. Yeah. Anybody that wants to use a so-called illegal substance for research, religious, whatever, has to go through Section 56. There is no other way to do it.
Okay, so you said that you had done this in consultation with some individuals in Peru. How did you? Because I think your story is one that it's only a stone's throw away. There's so many different accounts, especially for the last 20 years, I think, with the expansion of ayahuasca tourism, of people having these life-transforming, healing events from psychedelics in general and ayahuasca in particular. What led from that to the desire to and the initiative and eventually just you went through it all. You did get your Section 56 exemption. Interesting how that was blocked later, and I do want to get into that too. But
sure.
But what was that? How did that work in terms of the community that was interested in forming this? Because it was I don't get the sense that like you're the only individual involved in all this. So what was it? What was the community formation side of it that led to that Section 56 application and exemption?
There was an organizing committee, and these are people that work with the medicine in Shipibo traditions, in the traditional Amazonian way of viewing ayahuasca. And so I knew a number of these individuals. I said, hey, we need an organizing committee. I talked to my Shipibo shamans in Peru about doing something like this. They're all for it. they thought it was a great idea because we could then bring them up to Canada to conduct legal ceremonies. So they're all for it. They love to share their culture and ayahuasca traditions. So so we brought all these people together, and then I started going out looking for people, just social media, wherever, saying, we're putting together this traditional, we're putting together an application for traditional shamanic ceremonies. And and a lot of these people had been to Peru or other places or sat with shamans in traditional type ceremonies. And I said, here's what we're all about. I put up a pretty extensive website, Companionship of the Sacred Vine, and it outlined our religious viewpoints, our moral, our code of ethics, code of conduct, tradition. It went through everything that we're doing. I said, if you want to join this church, because it's a church under Section 56, it's a religious exemption. If you want to join this, sign up here. So I would get about 10 people a month, where I'd be talking to them and we'd be discussing things, and they would then go and sign up on the website. So by the time by the time I put the entire application together, it was 12 months. We had about 120 or so people that went, I want to be part of this. So that's really how that whole community came about, was me out there talking to people. And other people, of course, talking to people, and
Yeah, that's I find that. So we were talking before about how there are ayahuasca churches. There have been for quite some time.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, they're Brazilian. They
Right.
have their own history. What I was finding a bit interesting about the story you were just telling is there. With those ayahuasca churches, which have been around since I think like the 1930s in Brazil.
Yep, that's right.
It's kind of a similar story if you think about it, because what happened with those, and I don't know their stories too well, but I know the basic. It was rubber tappers going out into the Amazon, tapping rubber, and they met indigenous people who initiated them into their ceremonies, and they went back into the cities and started churches, being devout Christians and so on. They weren't Orthodox Christians. They're not in any doctrinal sense like Orthodox,
Right.
but they were Christians, and they were like, this is how we understand this, and we take this back. What I find kind of interesting about your chronology here is you weren't tapping rubber, but you, along with a lot of other people from our cultural hemisphere, have been going into the Amazon, and not running into ayahuasca by happenstance. That's the whole purpose. You're there to find that for a wide range of reasons.
Yes,
most
absolutely.
of them, maybe not most, but like I'd say quite a few, quite similar to your own. So it's not surprising that people would come back and be like, well, we got to do something with this. We need to recognize this in a way that kind of fits for us. So okay, so that's a cool story. The next bit that there's a lot of places from there that I'd want to ask about, but I guess the place to start, I think, would be the people who you met there, who introduced you to this, the Shipibo.
Sure.
Who are they? Who are the Shipibo people? What's their story?
A lot of the shamans that you're going to sit with in Peru and Iquitos, or Iquitos is kind of the hub for ayahuasca tourism, and people bandy that term about ayahuasca tourism. Well, In Mexico, you can go have dental tourism. I mean, it's done medical tourism, sports tourism, whatever. If I wasn't able to become an ayahuasca tourist, I wouldn't, somebody had to put up the accommodation. Somebody had to have a center someplace where I could go sit with people. So, I don't look at ayahuasca tourism in a negative connotation myself. So I was an ayahuasca tourist in Peru. And I was fortunate enough to find a guy that had been down there, my Canadian shaman friend, who wasn't a facilitator at that point, but he was on his way to being groomed for that. He'd been down there for 9 years. So he'd been to Iquitos and he'd been to all the different centers, and eventually wound up with Master Shaman Roger Lopez out of Pucallpa, Peru. And a lot of that's sort of a Pucallpa, Peru is, Iquitos is down the river from Pucallpa. Pucallpa is where a lot of the Shipibo people are based. So a lot of the shamans that are out there are when you talk about Shipibo shamans, they come from Pucallpa. So Roger Lopez, now deceased, but he was a master shaman down there. So I actually started sitting on my first set of ceremonies with my daughter, and I actually sat with Roger Lopez. He has 7 brothers. A couple of them are very good friends of mine, Noe Lopez and Tony Lopez, and I sat with traditional Shipibo shamans just by happenstance. That's how it happened. There is at least 7th generation lineage shamans. Roger Lopez's grandfather was a loincloth wearing Indian in the Amazon jungle. I mean, that's where that lineage came out of. So I sat. That's how I was introduced to the medicine by these Shipibo shamans in Peru.
Okay. So, in terms of what it is, because in order to present yourself as a religious organization to
Right.
Section 56,
Yep.
I imagine, some articulation of who the Shipibo were, what their religion
Right.
would be, kind of had to be communicated in some terms. And I imagine that process was probably vexing, intriguing.
It was, it's just like anything else with ayahuasca, incredibly fascinating, incredibly engaging when you start looking into what those traditions usually are. Because most people, ayahuasca tourists or whoever, they go sit with Shipibo shamans. They're not going to get exposed to the religious cosmology of the Shipibo people. Unless you like I did, make specific inquiries and say, hey, what are what's the religion? What's the belief system? What's the cosmology? Oh, well, then that opens that door and they will give you information about that, which is what I did. So that's when I actually found out about Axeti Nete, which is the Shipibo understanding of the 4 worlds that human beings can travel to in our human experience. There's 4 worlds that we're able to travel to in a soul flight, what's called a soul flight or a soul journey, or call it what you want, astral traveling. When you take ayahuasca, there are 4 worlds that you can travel into, and that is the 4 worlds of the Axeti Nete. So once I understood that and got more and more information about that, I went, wow, there is a deep religious cosmology associated with me sitting in front of a Shipibo shaman in Peru in a maloca that most people just never find out about it. I was initiated into Axeti Nete by 7th generation lineage shamans. They welcome people. It's kind of like a pastoral religion where they will help you. It's like Mother Teresa, I guess, or something, where they say, we will help whoever. You don't have to be a part of our religious cosmology. You don't have to pledge allegiance or sing hymns to Axeti Nete or whatever. We will just help you if you ask us to help you, which I did. So, that's how they operate. They are willing to share with other cultures that are out there.
Okay. So, the question that I have would be, what were some of the complications in trying to the government articulate what this religion is? And I'm very interested in just just like, because I get the impression that this must have been a square peg going into a circular hole at some points throughout this. So what was that? Because I that just, the Kafkaesque nuttiness of that, I'm sure was illuminating.
It was insanity, So the Reverend Richard Brandel has been with us from the get-go, 24-year ayahuasquero, an ordained reverend. So he has a very good background on what religions are, what they're not, that sort of thing. I got an education as to what religion is. And for the purpose of Section 56, a spiritual practice, like let's say you have a spiritual practice with whatever substance, cannabis or psilocybin or whatever, peyote or what have you, that's a spiritual practice. It's not a religious. You get into these distinctions, right? It's not a religious practice. It's a spiritual practice. So a religion has certain defined characteristics. Now, in the liberal or the loose interpretation of what a religion is, it's something that is of central importance to you or of supreme importance to you. That's kind of a definition. And then it gets broken down from there. But this trying to penetrate the density of the Section 56 program in terms of religious use is I can't even begin to describe it. They don't help you. Let me put it that way. You are on your own. It's guesswork. It's this, it's that, the other thing. When I prior to putting in the application, I talked to some lawyers and other people, and I'm trying to, well, how does this look like? Because all you do when they contact Section 56, just send us a letter requesting an exemption. Well, are you serious? That's
easy enough.
That's the instructions that you get. Where's the application form? There isn't one. Whereas for medical, scientific, or research, they have those. Fill this out, fill that out, and sure, we'll help you. In fact, we'll give you a service standard. If you fill all this out and we get it within 75 days, we'll make a decision. So none of that applies to the religious exemption, which is, anyway, that's a whole different conversation there. But I talk to people. What about shamanic? How is that a religion? Well, it's the base, people tell you all kinds of things. It's the mother of all religions. It's the basic religion. It was a religious belief system that started it. People tell you, shamans are Siberian shamans were the original shamans, blah, blah, blah. You get into all these different concepts and ideas. Long and short of it, a psychedelic lawyer in Canada just flat out told me, you will never get an exemption for a shamanic church from Health Canada, period, end of sentence. So I'm like,
And,
okay.
and I guess, like, what were some of the definitions of what religion is, as opposed to shamanic religion, so government definitions of religion versus shamanic religion? Because you were eventually successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
What were some of those biases that you had to overcome in the application process? Like, what were the things where Health Canada was scratching their heads and you're trying to explain, like, no, I do fit. I am this.
Yeah. Well, okay, so there is a religious cosmology. I can't just go in there and say, oh, this is a spiritual experience for me and give me a religious exemption. So there had to be an associated cosmology, a religious cosmology, just like Catholicism or Protestant or Judaism or whatever.
Right.
They have a belief system, a structured belief system, which is what I tapped into over the course of that year with my Shipibo maestros. Oh, how does this work? How does that work? What's this like? And then tapping into that, it just expanded my knowledge of what is going on in an actual ayahuasca ceremony. It's fascinating stuff. So, yeah, there is a religious cosmology. There's 4 worlds. Well, if you look at, I was raised a Catholic. There's 4 worlds of Catholicism: the underworld, hell, our physical world, purgatory, and heaven. And they correspond kind of in broad brush with the religious cosmology of Axeti Nete. It's kind of the same, so there was the basis of our religious exemption right there. That's what that's how the application was structured. We have a religion. It's got a name. There are 4 worlds. I can tell you the names of those 4 worlds. I can tell you what goes on in those 4 worlds. I can give you examples of how they work. And they were throwing stuff at me like, well, where's your gospels? Where's your prayer books? And, stuff like this. And
sorry to interrupt. I was about to ask, like, did any of this coming from a society that has not historically been literate, what was that a major thing? So, like, they were asking for things like written texts and things like this?
Yeah, like a Bible or something. So, right. Correspondingly, in Axeti Nete, when you travel into the Gene Nete, for example, where the spiritual helpers reside, where the plant spirits reside, where the master plants, the Shipibo master plants, are the holders of knowledge. They're the keepers of knowledge, which, by the way, is the subject of books now, by Walpole, and the Secret Life of Trees, I believe is the name of that book, where they acknowledge there are master plants within a forest ecosystem, and the mycelium layer just under the soil transmits and communicates with all the other plants in that forest and takes a fee for it. It's called the Wood Wide Web. And that Wood Wide Web is how plants communicate, right? So this is what happens in Shipibo Axeti Nete. There are master plants that are the keepers of knowledge. And the Shipibo culture understands ayahuasca is the keeper of knowledge in this area. Towe or Kanicheri or Datura is recognized as a medical doctor, a medical plant. Bobansana for your heart, opens up your heart. It works with the heart. So each of these master plants corresponds to what a gospel within a Bible. That's where the knowledge is kept. So I don't need to read, that's not written down anywhere. I travel into that world with that specific plant to understand the knowledge that's available in that particular area that I'm interested in talking to or studying or what have you, that plant will guide me there. That plant will give me the knowledge. And this comes about in what's called downloads. Like Graham Hancock had a book downloaded to him in an ayahuasca ceremony. I've had emails downloaded to me in ayahuasca ceremonies. The knowledge gets conveyed. The knowledge that you're looking for gets conveyed to you. And the plant spirits help you out in your exploration of whatever particular area you're exploring. Just like, I don't know, a biblical scholar would point you to the book of this or the book of that if you're looking for, a particular life lesson or whatever. And yeah, that's in this book, that's in that gospel or whatever, So, really, this isn't something that we're just pulling out of thin air and saying, "Oh yeah, we think it's like this." This is a structured understanding of knowledge systems, an alternative knowledge system, a plant-based intelligence that you're able to tap into through the use of ayahuasca. Well, what could be more religious than that?
And what was their response to this?
Well, they had no response. Eventually, I answered all their questions, and eventually they just quit talking to me. I would put in a what's going on with our application? Oh, it's under review. Next month, what's going on with our application? Oh, it's under review. On and on and on and on and on it went, And so, I mean, I know when I'm getting jerked around, it's pretty obvious. And I'd answered every question that they put at me, and then eventually they quit asking questions. I had an answer to whatever their so-called assessment was. So then they stopped. And then it was at that point that we started lobbying Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos. And eventually the health minister said, we told him we're getting jerked around in the bureaucracy. 2.5 years of this nonsensical back and forth that was meaningless in terms of a religious exemption. We have a religion. We want to practice our religious beliefs. We want to do it legally and safely. We have all the safety protocols. There's the Shipibo safety protocols. There's also modern safety protocols is put up by ICEERs and other organizations that study this. And just in that regard, ayahuasca is an eminently safe substance. It's no more physically, it's no more dangerous than a cup of coffee. It slightly raises your blood pressure. Women will be given, in Shipibo cultures, women will take ayahuasca to the 8th month of pregnancy. 5-year-olds will be given age-appropriate doses of ayahuasca. The psychological contraindications are psychosis. So, in other words, if you're schizophrenic, or if you are having trouble distinguishing reality, if you are unable to hold a coherent conversation, if you've had a break with reality, don't take ayahuasca. That's so. And even if you did, you would go someplace and eventually it'll wear off and it'd come back. Eminently safe, and it's been done for since prehistory. Nobody's dying in the streets taking ayahuasca and spurting blood out of their eyes and falling over dead. I mean, it just doesn't happen,
Absolutely. So essentially, it sounds as though they gave you some questions, not all of which were completely well-fitted, but were well-fitted to what they understood religion to be.
Exactly.
And after you had clarified the position, they basically just decided we're just gonna not talk to this guy. And eventually you just kept on bugging the minister until they signed off on it. They're just like, yeah. I know it when I say it. He's sincere. Check.
And, I have since put in access to information requests is what they're called in Canada, or freedom of information request. And I've asked them for what is the Section 56 definition of a religion. Never got an answer. What is the Section 56 criteria? There's policies in a federal in any bureaucracy. There's policies and procedures. Like if you're applying for building permit, there's policies and procedures. You need to put this in. You need to put that in. We have to have this, that, blah, 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 right? Well, on anything that the government of Canada does officially, they have policies and procedures for dealing with it. And so I put in an ATI for what is your criteria for assessing whether someone is sincere or insincere in their religious application. Nothing. Nada. It's still in front of them. I'm still working through that right now, trying to get that information from them. They've referred that question over to Department of Justice lawyers. So really, the department that assesses religious exemption applications, as far as I'm aware at this point, doesn't have a definition of religion. It doesn't have criteria. They have policies and procedures for dealing with an application, but they don't have, from the ATIs I filed, they don't have an assessment process whether you're considered a legitimate religion and you're not, or whatever. And how would you even do that? I don't know. I mean, you'd have to play God, basically. So the whole thing gets just nonsensical,
Absolutely. Well, that kind of brings me to the next bit that I want to ask about, because just in terms of delineation, because what is a religion? I personally would be rather nervous to put forward such a definition, and to be honest, I'm kind of thankful the government seems to share that hesitation, because they're the last people I would want to define that.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it does get into something that I kind of want to talk about, which is in this culture, the Shipibo culture, they refer to ayahuasca as medicine, correct?
Yeah, that's one of the ways they refer to it. Yeah, la medicina.
So, in terms of what's happening in our culture at the moment, there is a psychedelic resurgence.
Yep.
It's making its actually one of the only things that I can say has been positive about the Trump administration is they did an executive order today funding psychedelic science. Nice. I don't think Trump cares about that, but I'll take the populism grab. Yeah, I'm in favor of that. Still not. But there seems to be two major legal avenues that are seeing inroads. There's, on the one hand, medicine, and on the other hand, there's religion. But you were initiated into a culture that is religious, but also calls the central. I'm not sure if it even is central, because I don't know Shipibo that well. But they call ayahuasca a medicine.
Well,
whereas we kind of there's a separation of church and hospital in the West more.
Right.
So how is it a medicine in its traditional context, and how is it that it's not comparable to Tylenol? What is it that would make it a sacred medicine as well?
Right. It is called la medicina, which means the medicine. So when the Shipibo or other people are talking about in that context, they're not talking about aspirin or Tylenol or whatever. It's the medicine of the human people, right? It's a sacred medicine. It is not something that antibiotics or what have you. La medicina, and it's an acknowledgement that this is the medicine of people. There's nothing else that sort of supersedes the medicine. This is the medicine, heavy on the Z. So when it's referred to as la medicina, when it's referred to as mamacita, when it's referred to as abuela, or one of the other names that are put on it, it's in the realm of the sacred. So how could a medicine be considered sacred? So the Western anthropologists tried to explain it in terms of a peak experience. So la medicina gives you a peak experience. In other words, you can't have a high, this is climbing to the top of Mount Everest. You can't have a higher peak experience as a human being. And this again fits into Shipibo Axeti Nete. That is the highest experience you're capable of having. So for example, practical examples, like I felt in one ceremony, say, okay, here we go, gratitude at a level that the word gratitude doesn't even begin to describe the level of gratitude, that peak experience that you have available to you in the Axeti Nete, which is the Jakon Nete, where these peak experiences take place. It's kind of like a heavenly experience of gratitude or a heavenly experience of love. And, like I say, the clinicians, they try to categorize that as a peak experience. Everybody comes at it from a different mindset or background, trying to describe the same thing. But to me, it's all pointing to those types of experiences. So Shipibo Axeti Nete is the Jakon Nete, is the heavenly realm that you can travel to. That's the highest realm that you can travel to as a human being. That's the highest peak experience or sacred experience that you can have using this particular medicine. So that's how it's using its words trying to describe the indescribable. I had a poet friend of mine after his first ayahuasca ceremony. The guy's a recognized poet. He's published. He's, recognized poet. Andrew, how was your ceremony? Oh, he says, words. And this is typical after an ayahuasca ceremony. How was your ceremony? It's indescribable. I've spent the last 10 years trying to describe the indescribable, what people consider the indescribable, and put it into some frame of reference that people that haven't experienced the medicine could convey some of the idea of what's available in that, so-called peak experience. And it's difficult. It's you try to describe it. It's my daughter and I, after ayahuasca ceremonies, we would talk for hours and try to put a framework on it. And yeah, it's more or less successfully, I guess. I don't know.
So I guess what would an ayahuasca ceremony look like in terms of the practicalities of it? Like if you were an outside observer and you were just kind of like trying to outline, okay, well, people sit there, that person does that person does that, and you're just trying to outline, like, what are people doing? What does it look like? How does a traditional Shipibo ceremonial context function?
The way I start with ceremonies, you're in a maloka, which is, a few people or 40 or 50 people, might be 5 or 6 shamans at that maloka, whatever. So you're all arranged around the outside of the maloka. It's a round yurt-like structure. And you have a mat, you got a puke bucket, you got some blankets because when you go into that realm, you can get cold, pillow, try to be comfortable. So what would happen is an apprentice or a shaman will come around and sit in front of your mat and give you a cup of tea. And then you slap the tea back and sit there and wait for the experience to start, right? So after everybody's served, then at some point in the ceremony, and this is, again, part of the whole sacred process of this, the shamans will start channeling Icaros. Icaros are the sacred songs that are available to the shamans that have studied and gone through an apprenticeship, and they're given songs. And these are the songs that come through them and are sung in an ayahuasca ceremony. And let me tell you, when you're sitting there as a newbie and that medicine is starting to kick in and it's starting to get a little intense, I would sit there and go, God, start singing, because when the shaman starts singing, that's when you're taken into that sort of the guided tour of the cosmos that takes you into those realms, whichever realms you're going to be in. Now, let me explain to you who's in charge of an ayahuasca ceremony. Ayahuasca is in charge of an ayahuasca ceremony. The shamans aren't. They're helping, they're guiding out. You sure as heck aren't. Ayahuasca is a plant intelligence. It's a master plant. It's a recognized keeper of knowledge. There could be 40 or 50 people in that Maloka. There could be 5,000 people around the world, or in the Maloka in Pucallpa, or Malokas are full on a Friday night in Iquitos. And I can guarantee you that if you talk to anyone that's been in that ceremony, everybody has a different experience than anybody else. So I might be having one of the most intense journeys into the depth of my soul and how I was built as a human being. Somebody else beside me is laughing and giggling, and ayahuasca is, they're having a gay old time, having fun, and they need to tap into their childhood joy, for example. So who's choreographing all of those ayahuasca experiences? Ayahuasca is this plant spirit, this plant intelligence. And when you start understanding the intelligence of this plant spirit, it is beyond human capability of you to understand exactly how ayahuasca can look at you energetically. I'm not talking, psychologically, emotionally, energetically, and say, this is the energy we're working on in this ceremony. And then so you're sitting there, kind of deaf, dumb, and blind, and you puke up something into your puke bucket, and that energy is, all you know is that that energy has been lifted. And then as you progress more and more in the ayahuasca ceremonies and become more aware of what's going on in the ceremonies, you start seeing how these things work and what energy you're working on and how the plant is moving energy in this ceremony, so that the next ceremony you can get to that energy that's really causing the blockages. And then we're going to get rid of that energy. And the whole thing is choreographed. The whole thing is directed at a level that when you become aware of that, it's mind-boggling. It's almost incomprehensible how that could happen through that plant. It's it's pretty interesting, pretty engaging.
And that what you say about how as you go on and you become more aware of how these things are operating and stuff, and you mentioned that it wasn't until a bit into this this exploration that you began to talk to these guys and go like, what do you believe? And that's where you found out about Axeti Nete and so forth. What that leads me to ask is, and I ask this as a Western Buddhist. I've been around a few different Buddhist communities,
Yep.
and there's a thing in Western Buddhism called secular Buddhism. A lot of Westerners love a lot of what Buddhists say. They don't necessarily subscribe to all of the trappings of Buddhism, karma,
Okay.
rebirth, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
I personally do. I find that very compelling, but a lot of people just can't. They
Okay.
have no experience of it. They would be intellectually dishonest, but that doesn't stop them from loving a lot of other parts of Buddhism.
Mhm.
So how far would you say can something like the practices of Shipibo-based shamanic ayahuasca ceremony can be separated out from the cosmology and the belief system? Because people do show up and not have the faintest clue, and indeed generally won't unless they ask.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, in terms of because as Buddhists in the West tend to love meditation. They couldn't care less about doctrine.
Right.
Occasionally you'll get that inverted, but that's the sort of cliche. In fact, a lot of Buddhists will even be hostile to the idea of doctrine. They'll even put their own doctrine of secular Buddhism above classical engagements. So, what have you seen of that in terms of just those that type of engagement or lack thereof? What has that looked like? On the ground?
And the best thing I can tell you, Matt, is that a very good question, by the way. This is really central to a lot of what we do here. But if you never understood concept 1 about Axeti Nete, you can still experience ayahuasca in so many variations and permutations of that plant intelligence that I was just speaking about. And ayahuasca is for me, is a medicine of practicalities. It is the most practical thing that you're going to do. You want some relief? Okay, here's how we go about this. I mean, I'm sitting in an ayahuasca ceremony. I had dissociative disorder, or maybe I still do. They're doing a brain scan on me. Hold still, be quiet. This machine is going through my brain, and they're looking at, I don't know what they're looking at, but they know what they're doing. And so they are diagnosing you and saying, okay, for what you want to accomplish, here's what has to happen. Like if you talk to the quantum physicists, a human being is more like a human note than a physical being, right? And how that works, I don't know. But that note gets out of tune. That note there's discords within your note. And they look at it and say, okay, this. And I've heard actually of people being able to do this. I remember a magazine article way back when where this young guy would look at people and see the energy inside of them, the dark energy that needs to be removed. And he would go in and remove it. So, this to me describes what this process is all about. So when you set an intention, and this is a big thing, especially in early ceremonies, is they set an intention, I mean, my intention on my first ceremony was show me the nature of my fears. I was self-aware to the point where I understood I was dealing with childhood anxiety. So show me the nature of my fears. And people later be saying, you did what? Are you nuts? And she proceeded to show me. And at the end of that ceremony, I was like, I am never doing this nonsense again. Get me the hell out of here. Take me home, mommy. It was, but a shaman told me, well, it's a process, Allan. And so I hesitatingly went into the second ceremony and just kept working with the medicine. But it is a la medicina, the medicine of the people. Western concept might be an adaptogen. Ayahuasca adapts to you. I have some friends in Peru that are working with veterans, and Luke Jensen, he has this brain mapping technology, and there's hundreds of thousands of brain maps that you can compare. And so they do a brain map pre and post ayahuasca ceremony with veterans. And they look at the pre brain scan and the post brain scan. And what they've found is that the pre scan can be all over the map, different thing for different peoples, but it gets moved into what's considered a more normalized pattern. So maybe the amygdala is targeted, or the prefrontal cortex is targeted, but it moves them towards a more stable, let's say, brain state. And so, I mean, once you start understanding this, again, this is the intelligence of ayahuasca. The scientists are finding out about that. This brain is damaged like this, but we're moving that to a normal state. This brain is damaged like this, but and I'm broad strokes here. This brain has been damaged like this. We're moving it to a more normalized state. And how does it do that? How does la medicina, when the Shipibo call it la medicina, the medicine, how does it know that, if you take a Western prescription medicine, right, there's known effects. Oh, you take this and it will do this. With ayahuasca, there are no known effects. You take this, and it's going to do something. We don't know what it is. The medicine knows what it's doing. In practical senses, you're chasing your tail. What's it doing? It's helping. That's the be all and end all. That's the short story. The practicalities are, I went into an ayahuasca ceremony. I feel lighter. I feel better.
And that sounds pretty familiar in coming at it from a Western Buddhist perspective, because meditation's fine on its own. It doesn't whether you're a Geshe Tibetan monk who's done 20 years of memorizing, tantras and everything else, and been initiated into God knows how many ceremonies and whatnot, or whether you're just some guy who likes to sit down and, pay attention to his breathing for 30 minutes at a time.
Yep.
In either case, that practice is beneficial. So, I mean, that definitely sounds familiar. The follow-up question for me would be, so if it's good without that, what does that add? And when I say that, I mean specifically the cultural context, the cosmology, basically things that this culture has developed around this.
Right.
What does that bring? Because if you ask a Buddhist, they'll say, "Well, let me sit you down," because it's a very definite and very lofty trajectory that they try to bring you to. That they would say you won't access, at least unless you're so brilliant, you're the next Buddha, essentially. You're just not going to get there. So what does this bring to it? This richer context.
The Shipibo cosmology is a structural understanding of those felt benefits. Okay, so you don't need the structure as somebody new to the medicine, first 100 ceremonies, whatever. But maybe if you want to start working with the medicine, as something, instead of just receiving the medicine, but working with the medicine. And I think that's where that would kind of be the analogy that you're talking about. So understanding which world you're traveling to, understanding why you're traveling to the gene nete, so that you can interact with spiritual helpers, interact with master plants, interact with the spirit of jaguar, interact with the anaconda, to gain knowledge in those spiritual dimensions, right? So that cosmology allows you to understand experiences you're having in your ayahuasca ceremony. Now, the shaman can guide you into those areas. He can take you into places where, there's a door in front of you, and there's huge spirits guarding the door, right? And he can tell you, and you say, well, I was afraid. I didn't want to go through that door. No. You should have gone through that door, because that represents you overcoming some spiritual fears or what have you, right? So and I'm telling you, I've seen, I'm not at that level. Don't pretend to be. I'm not a facilitator. I give people ayahuasca, but I don't do this kind of work. Shipibo shaman can do things in a ceremony that just blow your mind. I'll give you one specific example of that. I was at a ceremony in British Columbia, and was kind of advancing with the medicine, and I could hear the shamans, like, they were talking, because I know these guys, right? And I can hear them. They're pouring out the cups for people. They're laughing and giggling. Oh, this is for Allan. Give him a lot. Give him a lot. Big joke, right? So they gave me this big horking cup of ayahuasca, and I'm like, whoa, holy Jesus. Okay, all bets are off if you're going to give me that much ayahuasca. So as the visions are coming in to the into my journey, and Roger Lopez was officiating this, and he says, Al, you have to learn to work through the visions. What the hell does that mean? I have no idea. But as these visions are coming in, at first they're beautiful. Now they're intense. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And somebody grabs me by my spiritual shoulder and pulls me out of wherever the heck I was. And now I'm somewhere. I'm someplace. I'm in one of the worlds of Axeti Nete. And I see two beings off in the distance. And I hear a soplar. This is a soplar. It's where a shaman exhales a breath loudly for whatever purpose. And there was 7 soplars that were done by one of these two creatures that I can see off in the distance. And each time the soplar came, these visions would build. It's like this is called castle building in Shipibo cosmology. And he is building castles. So soplar and these castles would build these visions. Beautiful. Oh my God. And the colors. And then another soplar, and they would go up and on and on and on and on. And later I asked Roger, I says, look at what was going on there. I says, there was 2 creatures in there. One of them was you, right? Yeah. He says, you heard me soplar? I says, yeah, 7 times. Yeah, 7 times. And the other entity in that place, wherever that was the Lopez family plant that they work with. That's their master plant that they've worked with for generations. Were both in that ceremony. So at that point, the Shipibo cosmology can help orient you in those worlds, or orient an apprentice or somebody to put those in terms. Oh, you're in the Jacon Nete, you're in the Gene Nete, you're in the Panchin Nete, and put those contexts so that the next time you go there, Maybe you can go there yourself. Maybe you understand how to do these things. But I mean, that's a lifetime of practice, and I'm nowhere. That is shamanism at a Anaya level or a master shaman level. That kind of work. I'll give you a little funny story, a brief funny story. So in those same set of ceremonies, these guys pulled in this BMW and parked it by the house and stuff, and he was swaggering in. And I heard ayahuasca you can travel the astral dimensions. And I'm going, wow, okay. So they're sitting in this ceremony, and the shaman, Roger Lopez, he was pouring visions on top of these guys, to the point that the one guy that had sort of been a little arrogant, he's like, what's going on? I didn't know it'd be like this. Help. That's, I don't know. That's a Shipibo shaman. It's just what happens, So, so these guys know what they're doing. Then that cosmology it's not theoretical or abstract. It's where they go. It's what they do. It's where they function.
Mm. Yeah, I suppose that it would kind of complicate the idea of like belief system if it's something that you've seen, heard, done. It's a bit another one of the circles with the square peg.
Yeah, this isn't a belief system; it's an experiential system. And I can tell you about these things, but if you really want to understand it, it is an experiential medicine. La medicina is experiential. I can tell you about this stuff. A shaman can tell you about this stuff. A shaman can tell you about building worlds in Panjin Nete or wherever. And what does that mean? I don't know. But when you travel there, okay, now you understand this. And I mean, at just a basic level, understanding love in the Jakon Nete, poof, that's profound experience to experience love at that level. And I can tell you that it's profound, but again, there's nothing that can give you that where you could tap into that experience unless you ingested ayahuasca and went there yourself, so.
So there's one last question, and I think this is roughly where I'll draw it to a close. So in terms of, because I don't think the Shipibo, and I don't know, but Shipibo religion as it's practiced traditionally, churches, temples, that sort of thing, I'm guessing was not quite how their venues were set up. I'm not sure if they had venues in general. I'm guessing they were sort of like, I mean, shouldn't talk about them in the past tense, still around, but traditionally they're more at the hunter-gatherer level, I'm guessing.
Yeah, the best reference I have for that is The Wizard of the Upper Amazon by F. Bruce Lamb, which if you're going to read one book about ayahuasca, that is one of my top recommended books. It's a guy was kidnapped, this rubber tapper, again, speaking of rubber tappers, was kidnapped by a group of Huincun Indians, and the shaman chief of the tribe, his son had been killed, so he's looking for a replacement. So he sent his warriors out to this group of rubber tappers. They kidnapped this 19-year-old guy and initiate him, groom him, and initiate him into their ayahuasca culture, right? So this is early 1900s in the jungle, Huincun Indians, traditional ceremonies. And what they would do is there would be a clearing in the jungle that they would all convene at, and they would light a fire, and there would be whoever's going to be in the ceremony would be sitting around that fire, and they would post guards because at that time the rubber wars were going on, and it was a risky business. So they would sit in those ceremonies, and there would be one in this book anyway. There's this one guy that was allowed to cook the medicine, and so he would be cooking the medicine that they would use in that ceremony. So then they'd all pass a cup of ayahuasca around, and then they would all go into shared visions. They were all in the same shared space, which I've had that happen a couple of times in an ayahuasca ceremony, but it certainly isn't typical. It wasn't for me anyway. And then that master, the shaman chief, would bring in, like, let's say a couple of the younger guys were having trouble hunting birds or something like that. They would bring in the spirits of these birds to show them the various calls and the habits and teach them. And he would bring in, and everybody was seeing this. This is that shared ceremony, and he would bring in the spirits of jaguar or anaconda or whatever, for whatever purpose, for lessons, practicalities, for the practical lessons of surviving in the Amazon jungle, one of the most hostile jungles in the world. And how do we survive here? Here's by understanding this call. It's by understanding that call from this bird. And incidentally, speaking of supernatural, they in this book they describe hunters that have the ability to go into the Amazon jungle at night, pitch black. I mean, there is nothing more black than the Amazon jungle at night, and hunt just like it's during the day. And this rubber tapper, Manuel Cordovo Rios, eventually learned how to hunt with the night hunters in the jungle. They can navigate a jungle energetically, again, seeing the energetic aspect of plants and the earth or whatever. And even in more modern accounts, there's accounts of people navigating the jungle in the dark under the influence of ayahuasca. And so that's early 1900s ceremonies. They didn't have a maloka. They didn't have a church. They didn't have a cathedral someplace with a high priest and now they have a maloka, but that's basically so that you don't get chewed up by mosquitoes, and
right.
they could put screens on it.
And you also mentioned that, a lot of what that ceremony in that context was about was just guy needs to sharpen up his game at shooting,
Yeah.
The preface to the question I was trying to ask, the reason I was trying to preface that is because it seems as though in this context, there's a lot of things that are not considered separate, that in our stage of culture,
right,
as an industrialized society and as a literate society going back 5,000 years, if you include the Middle Easterns, we've done a lot of separating out and dividing analyses. There's the separation of church from state. There's also church from hospital. And whereas like in that, like I feel like there may be a bit of an industry where people go to pray to perform better at work, but generally that's sort of seen as like kind of like I don't know, like come on, Jesus has got better things to think about than how well you're doing at the office. It seems as though there's a lot that is kept together that we separate out. But in bringing this to our culture, we kind of do have to put it in some, at least initially, into some venue or other. And the one that we're doing at the moment is basically hospitals and churches, and legally that's about it. There's
Right.
a lot more
Yeah.
illegal stuff, but
Yeah.
legally those are the two things. So if you were to, I mean, I would say they both sound like they're probably inadequate, but if you had to pick one, which would be the better way to get across what this is more successfully? What do you think that would be, and
Well,
why?
yeah, the closer you are to nature when you're doing ayahuasca, the better. I mean, doing ayahuasca in a jungle environment, wow, you are right there with the plants and the energetic influences of those plants. You can feel them. Um, you know, it's the you're tapped into the energy. You're tapped into the energy of what's going on. So now we come into a Western context, and we would sit in my living room in Canada. We would sit in people's basements. Uh, we didn't do very many outdoor ceremonies, but we did a few outdoor ceremonies. One on the beach, which was quite an interesting experience. But to go into a church and do something like this, I can't imagine it. I look at a church as a kind of a clinical.
I think I should rephrase,
Yeah, go ahead.
because I when I say like church or hospital, I'm not referring so much to like physical locations, but more like type of intentional usage. So like churches and places of worship tend to be, well, places of worship,
Right.
whereas medicine tends to be just, you broke your arm, go to the hospital, they'll fix you up somehow. But yeah, strictly speak, but yeah, there's this sort of division between reverence on the one hand and medicine on the other, and this tradition seems to have both. It seems it would seem artificial to separate that out, but at the same time, these
yeah.
are the pathways that are set forward legally.
Right.
So I guess of the two, they both, I think, would fail to approximate, but which would fail worse? Which would be a closer approximation of
Yeah,
what this is?
the hospital setting would be completely opposite to the experience. Like, I mean, it's not clinical. This is not a clinical setting. This is not, I mean, maybe I'm making it sound clinical or whatever, but it's certainly the furthest thing from a clinical experience you could ever have. Sitting in a maloka, you can't separate ayahuasca from the ceremony. There's just no way to do that. I've looked at it all different ways, and there are some people who are coming up with an ayahuasca pill. It's doomed to failure because it isn't the ayahuasca itself. It's what the clinicians call set and setting. What set you're in, what setting you're having in. And the reason behind that is because you go into a shared experience. Early researchers called ayahuasca telepathine because it opened up telepathic linkages. You are engaged energetically with everyone in that ceremony for, for the duration of the ceremony, and a lot of people afterwards as well. So, put yourself in a and in an ayahuasca ceremony, everybody's taking the medicine. There's not people in there that aren't participating in the ceremony. The shaman, in order for him to sing his sacred Icaros, takes ayahuasca, and that's how it's done. So for me, there's no separating. You can't go to a clinical setting, even nice place with pillows and comfortable and nice music pumped in. Some nurse or a clinician comes in, here, drink this. Well, you're on your own. Not a good idea in an ayahuasca ceremony, especially for people new to this ceremony or new to the medicine. You're getting kicked into the abyss without, you're getting driven to a neighborhood that you know nothing about. You're going to get lost. You'll come back, but there's no separating it from what they call set and setting. It's a sacred experience. It's a shared sacred experience. It's a facilitated experience, so that's my viewpoint on it.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that before. I mean, I guess I kind of had tangentially, but not quite in that way, because I don't know what Health Canada is defining religion as, but I would suspect that most governments, when they are pressed to define religion somehow or other, they probably do define them communally, generally.
Right. Yeah. No, good point, Matt. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So like the isolation aspect of it in how we practice medicine, I can see that as being a major inadequacy in terms of cultural translation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Which an organization built around worship that wouldn't be so much of an issue, because they're communal, they're religious.
Yeah, actually, wow, that's actually that I'm interested. That's a very good point you're making. It is a communal experience. It is a shared experience, as is, people sitting around singing hymns. It's a shared communal experience. That's a good point. I'm always making these getting these insights. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, very good.
Well, I think that's about all the major stuff that I wanted to go over for this one. So thank you.
Oh, this is great talking to you, Matt. This is really, Thank you very much for doing this.